Well, hello, folks. I'm Ellie Little, and this is your Neo Daily TA Wrap. We take a look at these markets, and we do it from a neoclassical perspective. Each time we ask ourselves what happened today, and what does it tell us about the coming ones. I do the show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday, broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, and archived on YouTube under the channel LA Little. You can catch me there anytime, any device, at your convenience. As far as these markets, the convenience today was down as the big pullback finally got underway. In fact, the Russell is actually 10%, if you can believe that, 10% off the highs at this point. Big down days, one of the biggest down days I've seen in a while. They got a little recovery at the end of the day, actually got a decent recovery. They were down even more. For example, SPX as an example, 41 to 46. You tacked on 5. So you pulled from 30 to 26. 31 to 26. So it was a decent bounce at the end of the day, but still heavy losses across the board. Really no place to hide in these indexes. We had bounces in pretty much all the commodities, and in particular the bonds. Bonds, huge move up. People moving to safety, and just the need to put the cash somewhere. It seems to be anymore. And so those bonds, holding up. The thing that keeps getting hit is gas and oil and anything like that. The other big thing today that is worth noting, and we'll see it in the charts a little bit later, is the dollar looks like it's finally going to pull back, which is going to take some of the pressure off these things. But, big down day. We were talking about the possibility of it taking place. I talked, I believe, last night about the Russell was the only one giving us a signal, and it was saying lower because it was at the lows and had broken last night. So let's pop over and look at the indexes here. Remember, we talked about potential ABCD structures setting up last night, and they fulfilled. Right? They all came through today. So you had this ABCD structure potential, sets up, fulfills, coming on down to the next target. That next target, I eyeballed it last night at about, I think I said 34 or something. It actually ends up being around 30, just a little under 31. So if you take and you measure it out, if you take this high of the low, and then you take this other high volume low right over here beside it, that's kind of where it's trying to get. And so you're not that far away. And if you look at these ABCD structures, for example, on the S&P 500, you're less than, even on the close tonight, you're less than 0.75% away from it. So not that much farther to the downside on the projections. And remember, these are projections. They're targets. When you're coming back, you're measuring a projection, which is the ABCD, and you're looking to see what it comes into to say, okay, does that make sense? Is that a good place? And in this particular case, the ABCD projection, where it's trying to get back into, does make sense, and that's a good projection. So to me, has a lot of validity. We'll see if it actually gets there, ends up a little bit short, overshoots it a little bit. Again, they're projections, they're not absolutes. If we keep going here and look at some of these others, Dow Jones, matter of fact, right across the board, they're all doing the same thing. ABCD structure of the downside. I'm not going to draw them all in, but I'll draw another one here. So you come down, you set a low, you bounce, you got another low coming down. This one also pretty good projection down. It's only about another 0.5%. 16,733 is the number. So I kind of overdrew that. Pull this back in some, goes to about right there. So these targets are the targets. This particular one doesn't line up on any good support, but the Dow really just kind of follows other things most of the time. It's not really the leader, in my opinion. So that's the listed guys. Let's go over to the NASDAQ and the NDX, because the NDX in particular has been the strongest. The NASDAQ has been pretty strong. S&P's, NDX, really the two strongest. NASDAQ was starting to catch back up. Now the NASDAQ is barreling back down the other way. 43.78 is the target on this one, so you're only bound to 78 would bring you bound about here. So that's the target on this one, and this one lines up pretty well. I like to see them come into the highs of the lows, and this one lines up pretty well with respect to that. If we look at the NDX, which has been the strongest and really which hasn't refused to break down. I mean, this is still doing a retest regen now off the prior swing point high. So far holding it, of course, you're hitting it with a lot more volume, and you got all the other indexes trying to push down. So it may not actually hold, even though the probabilities are pretty high that it will. That low on that high, 39.75, 66, we're at 39. Got as low as 72, so we went under it, back over. It has more volume. I suspect it is going to try to break it. ABCD structure here gets you down to, looks like about 39.60 is the numbers I've projected. That gets you down into this area, right, which would be almost into that high volume bar there. So I suspect, you know, this one's probably not going to hold. It's going to try to get down into those numbers. If you look at inside this, you're starting to get some wear and tear on some of the big names inside here that's been holding this thing up. One of them in particular being Apple. Apple's got this low volume, high volume, low. And I don't know that it's going to get there now, but I suspect it is going to try to get there before this is over. And what I mean by over, we may bounce before it gets there, but at some point here in this overall pullback, whether we bounce, do another leg down, that sort of thing, you put a high volume low out there, you can't get over the top, well folks, you're going to try to get to the other side. And I suspect that's what Apple's going to do. And then looking at our friend the Russell, which is the one that kind of set up the trade today, was telling us it wanted to get lower. And this is pretty much straight down, folks. It couldn't even set up an ABCD structure here. That's how weak it was. Here's that low. Broke it last night. That was suggesting, yes, we're going to go lower. Sure enough, starts out this morning lower and just keeps going, volume expanding. All of them volume expanding on them. The Russell is almost done. Now, you don't have a structure here. You have the structure on the weekly. That's why you look at all your time frames, because sometimes they're so weak they won't even give you the structure on the short-term time frame, for example, in this case. But you do have one here. Projection on this guy's 1080. That'd be about right there. It's coming right into the bottom of this bar. You get this low over here. That's 1076. So it's actually a little bit higher. So just a little bit higher than that. Let's see what these lows are. 70, 8272, 8253. Projections 80. So if it does, and if it holds down there, it's going to break out those swing point lows. But my guess is what you're going to see, and this is kind of getting into the synopsis here, is you're going to see it come down here and then bounce right off of it. You know, if it gets to it right now. The more negative thing is if it doesn't even get to it, if it doesn't test them, because it doesn't have the volume. Actually, I don't think it will. Let's look at the volumes. Let me see. Today is Tuesday. Actually, it's going to have the volume. Now, today's Wednesday. Wednesday's 3 days. So 3 into that gives me about 340 a day. Times 4 is 15, 16, about 17. This one has 15. This one has 2. It's not going to have the volume. So as you're coming down here, you don't have the volume, right? You finish off your ABCD structure. Folks, that's going to try to bounce. And we may see that bounce start as early as tomorrow, because this has been the leader on the way down. Yeah, it can bounce. You know, it can test some more because you closed almost at the lows, but you're getting very close here. That's the indexes. Now, if you go in and look at the sectors, right, the sectors are doing the same thing. And it's not uniform across all of them, but most of them have the same setup, and most of them are doing the same thing. Namely, they're doing bearish ABCD structures to the downside. So if we pop through some of these that are doing it, Actually, let's start with the IBB because this has been one of the strength areas in the NASDAQ. Remember, I told you on the weekly, excuse me, on the monthly, last month we were able to measure it. They went up, they tested, they failed at the highs. If these things start barreling down, boy, we're gonna have some bad stuff, right? Because remember, April, the big declines back February, March, April, those were led by this index. They hit a high in February, and from February until April, it was straight down on these, about 20 something percent. If they come off again 20 something percent, believe me, the NDX is going to feel it again. So this is a big one to keep watching. That's why I got it on the boards now, so we keep an eye on it. But if we want to look at some of those bearish ABCD structures, there's a number of them. IYT. This is an Ebola crisis today, or this one got hit. The airlines pretty much across the board been getting hit. Got hit again today on that confirmed case down in Texas. So the IYT takes it on the chin. Look at the XLB. Talk about destruction. Wide price spread, high volume, just blowing out everything. Comes down, going to test this low, actually got under it back over, has more volume. That's also a weekly low, is why it's bouncing here. But you can see it's hitting that even with as much volume, and we got 2 days to go. This thing's going to give way and go even lower. So the materials sector just being hammered. XLE cannot lift no matter what. Could not even put an ABCD structure in place here. Has finished up its ABCD structure on the weekly. Just keeps coming down. XLF, ABCD down now. Now all of these, if you look at these and you measure them up and say, okay, how much? This is the one that has the most. It's got about another 1.75% or so. IYT about another 0.73. The XLB actually has an ABCD down another 0.25%. They're getting towards the end, which is echoed in the indexes and here in these sector ABCDs down. 1% more on this one. And if I keep going, it's across the board, even places where you wouldn't expect it. XLK ABCD down. That one measures another little over 1% on it. We've got even the XLV, if you can believe that, has an ABCD structure to the downside. That one's almost done. XLY, same thing, ABCD down, measures another 0.5%, takes it to the lows. Folks, it's an ugly picture, and honestly, it's about time. So the summary here, just looking at all these. Oh, and before I finish, let me pop over and show you the dollar. It's kind of hard to get the summary done in 10 minutes. Maybe I'll have to get the summary done in about 12 minutes from now, because there's usually a little bit more to talk about than that. Two things on the aux boards to notice. One is the TLT skyrocketing, money flying to it. Going to go back up. There's a gap area, big gap area. It's kind of an island reversal, but this trades overnight, so I don't pay that much attention to them. Going back up, going to try to fill the gap, get up there. So, money run into safety today, and the same thing here. Dollar finally looks like it's going to try to come down. You had a little volume coming off the top here. So that one's going to get back into first this bar, and then this one over here right in there. So I would think the target here on the pullback is this area. Initially, you'll get some support here as you see it already on the charts. But you'll probably see some support in this area, and that's probably where it's going to pull back to, potentially the bottom of them, these big bars. That's where the last consolidation was. So big move up in the dollar. That's been shaking the trees. Currency moves, fast currency moves, but we're close enough now to where it's not. Some folks asked me today, is it time to get short? Well, no, it was time to get short a couple days ago, but it was a tough short because you had a lot of volatility. You're close enough now where you're probably going to see those bounces. Now, the wild card in all of this, of course, is the Russell. Tomorrow's Thursday, right? Thursday, you've got ECB, and right now the expectations on the ECB are minimal. In other words, they don't expect them to do any kind of mortgage-backed securities yet. They don't expect them to certainly to do any kind of quantitative easing. Anything on either of those two fronts is going to get the dollar juiced again. If nothing happens, and Draghi says, well, we're going to wait it out a little bit longer, then that dollar is going to come back off. You're going to see bounces in the commodities and some of the other things, as you started to see try to happen today. And you probably get some bounces in the equities as well. The wild card is the Russell. If this Russell, it should bounce. If the Russell cannot bounce and starts blowing out these lows, forget it, folks. We're going a lot lower. And so, that's the wild card, and that's the one you really have to watch here on the way down. So let me dig in a little bit deeper to a couple other things. I do expect, we could get a little bit more pressure in the morning. Maybe we bounce, maybe we just hang down here, and then you get the employment numbers on Friday. But at some point here, it looks like it is going to try to get a bounce. And then the question is going to be, what kind of bounce is it, right? I mean, every time we've seen this kind of scenario, what has it done, folks? Up. I mean, down, straight up. Is that going to be it again? Down, straight back up again? I don't know, but I'm certainly quite aware of that, as is everybody else. As a matter of fact, when you got down to these lows today, you can see the bottom fishers coming in. They're already looking at that big bounce and salivating on it. So that's going to be the big news probably. I'm going to push over. I want to look at two things in particular. One being inside the NDX. Because inside the NDX, you've got some heavy weighted stocks. So far, they have not broken down. And even as a group, they haven't broken down. So we talked about the IBB. Let's look quickly inside the IBB at the heavy weightings in here. Here's Amgen. Still holding up here at the highest levels, right? And I'm going to take the highest weightings one here. Biogen. Actually, it's coming down. Biogen's got a big range trade, going to try to test the lows, it looks like. Another big weighting is Alexin Pharmaceuticals. That one actually looks pretty good still. Celgene's another large weighting. Let's see what that one looks like. That one also holding up pretty well. Gilead is another. Let's see what that one looks like. Let me see. Let's get Gilead up. And that one still looks good. So I don't see a lot of deterioration here. So biotech's still looking pretty good. That's a big weighting. Another big weighting is the SOX. Let's go look inside the SOX. And to do that, I'm actually going to pull the NDX up. So bear with me. Let me find it. There it is. And we'll pop into the heavy weightings here. Let's start with Apple. Apple we'd already kind of looked at. It still looks to me like it's going to try to get down here, but you don't have any volume expansion. So Apple's still, not looking too bad actually the way it's trading. The next largest weighting in here is, well, Amgen's a big one. Amazon's another large one. This is 3.5% of the index. That one's going to go after the lows, it looks like. Another large one is Baidu. Baidu still holding at the higher range. So you kind of got this big range up here, and it's holding that range still. So Baidu still looks okay. Looks like it is going to try to test the lower end of that range. So that one is a little weak. Let's see what else we got. Celgene we already looked at. And I'm just going down the list and picking the largest ones. The one you wouldn't think of is Comcast. Wow, now that one came off, huh? That one's going after the lows and doing it with volume. And honestly, it's about time, because I don't know how this one holds up with all the changes taking place and the undercutting of their services. It's kind of amazing they can hold it up. And a big part of this company is outsourcing. Huge part of this company is outsourcing to India. That's how they've kept their costs down. That's how they keep making their money. At some point it's going to bite them, I suspect. But right now, big ABCD structure down. Look at the ABC on this one. This one's going lower, folks. You take this high to there, back up. That is a huge ABCD structure down. That's going to take it down into like, looks like about maybe 50 or so pretty big number. So that was a big, yeah, it's 2.5%. It's a big weighting. Here's another one, Cisco. That was almost 2.5%. Cisco still holding up okay, nothing special. Let's get another large one. eBay. Okay, so eBay's interesting because you know, Icon has done his thing over here again, right? So Icon comes in and just, you know, just jumps all over management. You know, he's the breakup artist, and he comes in and he says you got to break it up. So today I read that he's telling them not only, okay, now you're going to break it up, now you got to sell it off to somebody. He's a joke. Anyway, got a high volume there. You know, this thing's going to crawl back up there. You know, as much as I dislike it, it is going to crawl back up there. So, you know, he's doing what he needs to do to make his money, I guess. So that one's okay. Let's look at the last one here, or the last couple. Facebook's another one. This one came off today. Volume did expand today. Okay, so this one's interesting. So it tests this high volume low, gets under it, back over it, holds it. This one's going to bounce right back up and hold. 50, let's see, where's another one? Google. Let's look at the Google pair. Okay, so they're coming down testing lows. No volume expansion. That just looks like they're testing the bottom end of the range. And the sister Google L, same thing. And let's quickly look at a few of the chip stocks just to see what they look like. So here's linear technology breaking down, volume expanding. How about KLAC? Volume expanding, breaking down. MU's another one, just came out with earnings not too long, popped up, starting to come right back down. That looks like it will hold for now though. Another big weighting, or not another big weighting, but another semi, there's a bunch of them. NVIDIA, that one's coming in to test that breakout zone. That probably holds for now. So, you know, it doesn't look too bad here. Qualcomm's another one waiting. That one's going after the lows. Microsoft's another big weighting. Let's see what Microsoft looks like. That one's about 8% of the NDX, and that one still looks okay also. So, yeah, inside the index doesn't look too bad. Let me pop over real quick and take the questions that were emailed in. The first one has to do with, let's see, what do we got here? Bear with me, let me get to the sheet. Okay, so first one has to do with, oh, it was a question about how do I view, you know, well, let me read it to you, and then we'll just kind of talk it through, and I'll pop up a chart that we can look at. So the question was, hi LA, I have a question about reversal bars that I wonder if you could address on tonight's wrap. You have often mentioned that if a reversal bar, like a long bar, and let me actually pull up a chart here that shows it as we talk about it. So an example of this happens to be on the indexes like the S&P 500. So you often talk about a reversal bar, a long bar closing near its low at the top of a trend, for example, that has high volume. So this bar has high volume. So you go up, you spike the top, right? High volume, then you leave volume at the top. And I always talk about that you know, at some point that's probably going to get revisited. So that's an important thing to realize. So, you know, when people tell me or ask me, you know, are we going to have a crash? Well, yeah, it's possible, but you got volume at the top. You usually don't have crashes when you got volume hanging at the top. And if you look at this one, now this one's, you know, weekly, not that much. But when I look at big volume, like a big spike like here, right, even though it's red, in other words, red is it closed lower than the day before, it still had volume at the top. What does that mean? And that's really what the question was shooting at is, you know, what does it mean to you? What do you think's happening? Well, I could hypothesize, and actually the gentleman here does, I could hypothesize about why that's important. But what I know is that when I did all my analysis, when I wrote the books, you know, when you have those high volume tops, for whatever reason, you know, they're important. Anytime you have a high volume, especially when it becomes a swing point, which is what this one is, that gives you a high volume swing point, and those typically do get retested at some point. Now the other case that I've talked about before, and I'm looking for an example on these, but I don't see one. Actually, the best example is, yeah, there is one right here on a weekly, is that when you have an extended move. And so in this particular case, right, on the S&P, you had a fairly extended move here. And then what happens is you go over, back under, and you have a lighter volume. So if you take these two bars and these two bars and you go over, back under, right, lighter volume, that situation usually calls for a pullback. And why is that? Well, in this case, you know, the buyers couldn't hold price up, and at the end of the day, right, compared to the day before, and in this case it's a week, they were unable to hold price at a high. In other words, they tested, couldn't hold it, failed. After a long extended run, extended means fast in terms of time and price, that usually gives you some sort of a pullback, and you saw one on the next bar. That sort of action is, you know, typical of a case where they've run out of gas. And if I go back now to the daily, here they were stepping on the gas. It's just that they didn't step on it hard enough. So there was a lot of folks thought, okay, this is where it was going to be. You got some short covering. There's a lot of stuff happening up there, but it wasn't enough to keep going. But there was a lot of volume left there. Why is that important? Honestly, I don't know. I just know that it typically gets retested, and I suspect this one probably will too, somewhere down the road here. Which actually is something important, and that is that you're going to want to buy this pullback when the pullback is done, and that's something important to realize as well. Next question had to do with, let me see what the next one was. The next one had to do with AAL, it looks like. And well, let me take that back. While I'm still here, let me take this question, and then I'll go to the other one. Question was, as we're coming in on the TA Today charts, they draw in support and resistance, right? Question is how important is the support? Is this support, the top of this bar, going to hold it? Well, you know, I kind of answered that already, but you know, I'll go over it one more time, and that is that you have projections to take you lower. You also have, at the same time, some ideal places for it to go lower. And so if you ask me, is this going to hold? It could, but the better hold would be down in here. And what you probably can't quite tell, but if you look at it closely enough, these are two support zones. There's one here and there's one there. The overlap of them is right there, and that's the best place. Looking here, understanding that is there, right? The best place is not the high, but that overlap. So that's where I think the best place is going to be as we come down, because it fulfills the projection and it's the overlap of the anchored support and resistance. Excuse me, the anchored support zones. Let's look at the last one here. Had to do with AAL, which is American Airlines. They bought, this particular gentleman bought, gentleman I guess it is, bought at 34 and sold some 37 calls. He's trying to play the bounce. He's wondering what I think. You had volume today. You closed under the lows. You could get a retest of that low tomorrow. So I think you're probably going to see a little bit more action to the downside potentially. If you pull over the weekly, you also are breaking this swing point low and you're going to have the volume. So there is the possibility here. I don't know if it's a high probability, but there is a good possibility you're going to test lower. And if that Ebola stuff gets more pressed, this may actually test even lower than you think. So I think you will get that bounce. I just don't know if you're going to get it now. It may take a little while. If the market flips around and really starts to head higher, the key thing is you'll want to see it get inside this bar. If it does, it'll seek the other side. That's exactly what you want, because you got the 37s. So that would be the trade. Let's see what it does on that retest down here. If it gets it tomorrow, if you get the bounce immediately and you get here and you can't get over it, you may want to rethink that a little bit. But if you get into it, right, then you have a good possibility of getting that full bounce, which you're playing for. All right, folks, I'm out of time. I appreciate you sending in your emails, your questions. Much better show when y'all do that. And, tomorrow, we may get that bounce tomorrow, or we may just kind of hang here a little bit longer. But ABCD projections, another 0.5% on average, a little bit farther to go, and then some sort of a bounce, and then we'll have to measure the bounce as it unfolds. Thanks for joining me. I'm LA. This is and it was your daily NeoTA wrap. Tell a friend, tell two, help you. I'm gonna cut out here. Have a great one. Thanks.